Hi everyone, it's Nono here, and this is one more episode of the Getting Simple podcast. So this is the second time that I have Ian Keogh here. So he is the father of Dynamo, founder of Hypar, the company he's working on right now. So in this episode, we've been talking about Hypar, we've been talking about visual programming, open source and authorship, pricing models of our subscription-based things online. We've also talked about, we talk about life. So we've been talking about climate change and AI and other things. So I just hope that you enjoy it and you stay with us.
Hey, it's Nono, and this is the Getting Simple podcast.
So welcome, Ian.
Thank you for having me, Nono. I'm excited to be back. I think this is a great time actually for us to be talking again because so much has changed. Nono came out to my house, recorded in my kitchen, the first podcast, and then we went surfing. So
Yeah,
we don't get to go surfing here because this is the Mississippi River, but next
yeah.
time you come out.
So I've been thinking about touching base or catching up again, but I felt like it's annoying to do it through Zoom or online, right?
Well, it's been 4 years,
Yeah.
so that's
so-
okay. You can call me like every, once a year, once every couple of years at least.
Yeah, we've talked, maybe. I don't know have we actually talked?
I don't know if we've talked. It's hard for me to remember these things because I connect with everybody on social media now. So I'm never sure. Did we talk in person? Did we just like
Yeah,
direct
yeah.
message each other on Twitter?
Not
Like,
sure. Anyhow, good opportunity to meet in person. So hopefully we'll unveil some of those things. And yeah, you can go back to the other episode. I remember that I spent probably an hour asking you questions that had nothing to do with Hyper, and I'm not gonna repeat. Maybe I repeat some of those and see what you ask. So
well,
what is your
it's
response?
fair. At the time, Hypar had just started, right? Like we started the company, I think, in January of 2018. I left Autodesk in November of 2017. I started the company in January of 2018. And you were talking to me in, I think, July of 2018. So not much had happened, right? Hypar was still very much like a dream more than it was a reality.
Yeah. So back then you were always you were already working. I'm not sure if that's always been the case. You were working remotely for Autodesk even before you left, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And I remember that, some of those pictures of meetings from your garage.
That's right. My garage office outside my house.
Okay. So does that still work the same way? Is that still your office? Do you have another space?
It does. It's starting to wear a little bit thin, I think, because both my wife and I are both working from home, right? So, and we live in this tiny little California bungalow, as you remember, and of course, the pandemic forced everybody back into their home offices. So we upgraded our setup a little bit, and of course, Hypar is a remote company. We're fully remote, so everybody works in their spare bedroom, their spare home office, wherever they might be. But I do have my new director of sales who joined us in March. He's actually in Santa Monica. It was funny because he joined us, and actually, I didn't even know he was in Santa Monica. And then he calls me. He's like, I'm like right down the street from you. Of course, because we hired him during the pandemic. And so I said, oh, yeah, maybe we have to get an office space at some point here. So we're trying to develop some critical mass in a couple of locations and maybe get some actual office space for Hypar.
So how big is the team right now?
So we have 9 core team members and 4 contractor team members.
Okay. Yeah, can you name some of those? Like who are these people? Do we know any of them?
Well, I think a number of people who might be listening, know Andrew Human. Andrew Human joined us very early on. I think he was employee number 4. Employee number 3 was our friend Matt Campbell, who was on the Revit team at Autodesk and then did a turn through Google. And we're still pinching ourselves every day that he decided to come and be the CTO for Hypar. And then we have a number of our friends who came out of that Andrew knew, for instance, from WeWork. So Serena Lee, Chuck Driesler. And then we have our new director of sales, Eric Bass, and we have Eric Wassail, who came out of Microdesk and is fantastic mechanical engineer and is doing a lot of work on our mechanical engineering side.
So do you remember everything? Because you're telling me that Hyper was just getting started, right? So what has happened? What's been the evolution of the company, and what are you doing now that you thought you were going to do, or what things are you doing that you didn't expect?
So when we talked last, I had come out of both myself and my co-founder Anthony Hauk came out of the generative design AEC group at Autodesk. We were working on Dynamo and things related to Dynamo, so Project Fractal, design optioneering and optimization, using Dynamo as the sort of scripting language. And then also in addition to that, I was working on some Forge platform distributed service kind of stuff with various Autodesk IP. So when we started Hypar, we figured we'd build the next thing that we thought the industry needed past Dynamo. I love Dynamo. Obviously, there are challenges with Dynamo-based workflows vis-a-vis scalability, the ability to orchestrate graphs together, and everything else. So we started with the tenets of just kind of like, let's improve some of those things about the workflow, and give people a way to orchestrate their process expertise and their automation, and do it in the cloud and through the web, so anybody can access it. You don't have to download anything. And as part of that, we figured we'll sell to our friends who are architects and computational designers inside engineering firms, stuff like that. But many listeners might not be surprised to learn it's hard to sell to architects and engineers. You know, and so an interesting thing happened about 18 to 24 months ago, and this is to your question about what happened that I never sort of expected would happen. We started getting contacted by a number of building product manufacturers. And building product manufacturers had this problem that they have these systems that are highly configurable and very automatable, and that they could sell more of their product if they could end-to-end automate the sort of design, layout, analysis, and product selection of their systems. And so one of these came to us, our customer AliAxis, who's been with us for a long time. And then more started coming, and they started asking the same set of questions and asking for the same sort of set of features on the platform. So we got into sort of building product manufacturers as this interesting place to be. And at the same time, we started working with a type of contractor who's doing like full building, or what we call buildings as a product. So I'm delivering a multifamily housing unit, or I'm delivering an office block, or I'm delivering some specific type of building product that we specialize in. And what we've started to do just in the last like 6 months, we've started to connect those two. So the whole building product manufacturer, they need systems and services inside the buildings, and they want to work with building product customers who have already sort of like automated their system, so they get a fully automated product in the end. We're just starting on the beginnings of that, what we think is going to be a kind of a virtuous cycle. So we went from trying to sell to the sort of audience of computational design people to trying to sell into building product manufacturers and contractors, which are spaces that are, you know, we're still very much learning about.
Okay, so trying to understand here as a newbie, because I've been following but really loosely. So you have the two products. One is more like the building scale, and the one is inside, or
underlying all of this is actually kind of one product. The product is the Hypar platform, right? So you can automate any of these problems on top of the Hypar platform. The difference between these two is that a building product manufacturer, you might make a set of services that solve just the specific case. I'm laying out a drainage system. You have a set of services on Hypar that do specific things: routing for that, product selection for that, sizing, analysis, whatever it might be. The buildings as a product manufacturer is a much bigger workflow. It's like that, but it's like more services, more connected stuff together, generating larger and larger parts of the buildings. But it's all based on the same underlying platform. So we are still learning right now. Like, is there some product differentiation that's going to happen? Are we going to sell a product in a certain way to a certain set of customers? And we're letting the customers guide us in a way there. What a number of our customers have started to ask for is things like the ability to embed Hypar. Can I take the entire visualization stack, interaction, the cloud-based compute generation, and embed that right in my company's website, where we're creating a customer-facing portal where they can do the design and configuration of our services? So that might end up being kind of like a separate product. And then, of course, we get a lot of people also asking, can we just get an API so we can build our own applications on top of your stack? And that's a very open conversation that we're having with a number of customers as well.
So one of the first things that I see when I enter your website is test fit, right? You can do test fits. I'm actually haven't been in the architecture industry. I'm working kind of tangentially with certain parts of products, right? So can you explain what that is, what that offering is exactly?
Yeah, and this goes to sort of what are the products on Hypar. But like I said, we had a number of our teammates who came out of WeWork, and so when we built the platform, it's a little bit hard to talk to somebody about a platform because they're like, "Well, what's a platform?" So we thought, okay, what are the automatable things out there that would read really well and perform really well on the platform, and for which we could save people hundreds of hours of manual, model creation. And Andrew Human and the other ex WeWork team had an embedded expertise with office test fitting, right? Of the WeWork kind of style. So we started to build some space planning tools on top of Hypar. And now, even today, you can go and use space planning on top of Hypar by creating your own sort of automated room types and laying out, tens of thousands of square feet of commercial office in hours as opposed to days.
And is that heuristics based? That's deterministic? Or?
No, it's really, and when people say, oh, is there AI or ML or any of that stuff? I think maybe even back to the very first version of our conversation, I said, there's going to be a lot of just plain automation before we get to AI, ML, or any of that. So the space planning solution is largely just you define the framework for a room type. I have a conference room. A conference room always has to have this kind of table in the center. And if the room changes size like this, you get a bigger table or a smaller table. And then it always has to have these smaller things that are lined along the walls in these ways. There's a set of rules that define a layout for one type of room. And then there's a rule set that operates on top of that is the layout of the space types itself. It's the thing that chops up a space with circulation and cores and everything else. And then within that makes the parceling out of the specific space. Oh, we need a conference room here. We need a conference room here, according to some area plan, which you can give it, or a required area mix that you need. And then you drop in, I need conference rooms, I need open office space, I need whatever. And then it kind of floods those zones with that kind of layout.
Okay. So I've also seen I'm not sure if I got to use it, but this was some time ago. Element, right? It's called something that is open source on GitHub.
Yeah, so I think this was probably when we last talked, the thing that I had probably started working on, because I think I joked at the time that the idea for Hypar came when I was sitting on a beach in Hawaii and thinking, okay, we were going to build a new stack for AEC, a new software stack. What would we have to build to have that thing decoupled from all of the historical and legacy software? And obviously that's a tough challenge, right? Because there's geometry kernels and everything else that we use every day inside Revit and other applications. And so those of you who have followed me on social media know that there was a period where I was doing a lot of deep dive research and development around IFC. So I thought, okay, that way of encoding elements in the world schematically, that needs to be in there. And then we needed a very simple geometry kernel. And we joke, flat stuff with holes in it. That's what the geometry kernel for Elements started out as. Now it's gotten more sophisticated since then, but if you look around the world, 99% of everything is flat stuff with holes in it, right? And so we made that thing from the beginning, Anthony and I, it was kind of core to Hypar that we make that thing open. And when I say that, I don't just mean open in the sense that it's a good marketing term. I mean, anybody can go and fork that thing on GitHub right now, compile it, build your own stuff, and it doesn't have anything to do with Hypar. You can use that as an interstitial layer between Revit and whatever your Revit API automation code is. You can use that thing in a Unity game engine thing. You can, of course, use that thing to make Hypar functions, but we also were responding in a way to our early customers who said, I feel locked in to certain platforms. Can you give me an opportunity to externalize my expertise in a format that's portable and I can move it around? If I decide I don't want to work with Hypar anymore, I don't want it to be a lost cause that I took the time to encode my expertise in this way. And so that's what Hypar, or that's what Elements facilitates.
Some people that listen to this podcast will know that Ian initiated Dynamo and the Dynamo project, and then kind of let it be its own thing by open sourcing and having a lot of community engagement, and then others take over it. Have you done any other experiments with visual programming? Is something that you've got back to in terms of let's create the new?
It's very difficult for it. Sometimes it feels like developing Hypar, we're sitting on our hands, because obviously we brought Andrew Human onto the team. Many might know that he was a huge contributor to the Grasshopper ecosystem, an expert in visual programming. We had a deep expertise with Dynamo and visual programming that way. And I always loved seeing people's journey through visual programming on Dynamo to adding a little bit of Python code to their Dynamo scripts to maybe writing full Python automations to saying, I want something that's a little bit more performant to like learning C sharp. I get that story, last night at the Dynamo party here at AU. I had several people come up to me and say, man, that was my entry into scripting and automation. So thank you very much for that. Well, when Andrew joined the team, he and I were like on a call on a weekend. We're like, maybe we build a new visual programming thing. And we had to stop ourselves from doing that because we actually didn't think that was the solution we needed. The challenge with visual programming is that it's somewhat fragile. It doesn't scale very well. There's not a visual programming system out there yet that you can check into source control and collaborate on using all of the programming tools that we have out there. So we started HypeR Code first to take advantage of all of the amazing infrastructure that's out there right now for people developing code. And what we're going to do next, and you've probably all seen little prototypes of this on social media, it's still difficult for a developer to get started on HypeR. They have to, if they want to build a function, they have to download our CLI, they have to run a bunch of commands in the command line. Where is my command line? I don't even know where my command. So they have to learn stuff. They have to do a bunch of tooling locally. We're gonna basically move that whole development thing right into the browser. So at the same time that you're looking at the rest of your workflow, you'll be able to pop into the logic for a function and edit it on the fly and see the effect on the fly. Because Andrew made the point this morning, we were just talking about this. He said the one thing that's missing between HypeR's development experience now and Grasshopper or Dynamo is that you cannot see immediately the changes in the geometry. You can't use it to visually prototype and diagnose what's going on in your script. And as soon as we move that functional logic to be editable in the browser and compilable and runnable in that right in line with a workflow, you'll get all of that. So we're really excited about that. It's just, small team. We're trying to pick, we've got things we want to do around performance. We have things we have to do for customers, trying to pick our battles.
Yeah. What's the programming language of choice?
I've been a C# fanatic for a long time. You all know that. And you've probably heard me talk about Unity, my days as a Unity developer in the past. When I started the Elements library, I chose C# because we thought, look, if anybody in AEC has programming experience right now, probably against one of the hero application APIs. You're developing Tekla plugins, or you're developing Revit plugins, or AutoCAD plugins, whatever. And at some point, a number of years ago, a lot of those standardized on the .NET languages, including C#. So we figured if there was any crossover knowledge at all that we could get people to reuse on HypeR, that C# would be a good place to go. And of course, at the time, and still, Unity was very, very popular, right? We wanted to make it so you could take your Elements code, run it on HypeR if you wanted, or take and put it in a Unity thing as well. Since then, we have added Python support. So now you can do Python 3 with whatever packages you want on HypeR. We've added support for things like machine learning models. You can take a PyTorch model, host it on there. And of course, you can also put a Grasshopper script on there. You can also put an Excel workbook on there. We have all these different ways of running your business logic. And the cool thing about HypeR is that the user doesn't have to know that. They just see a workflow. Behind the scenes, though, we're running C#, we're running Python, we're running ML models, we're running all this stuff. But we take care of all the orchestration for you.
So now that I have this fresh in my mind, because I recently talked to Andy Payne, what are you doing to run the Grasshopper scripts?
We have our own instances of EC2 on which we host Grasshopper, and we have a connection to Grasshopper that it adapts that to look exactly like the runtime connections for the rest of our infrastructure, which is largely like AWS Lambdas. So when you submit your function to run on HypeR in the form of a Grasshopper script, we actually send that thing down and execute it.
So you don't use Rhino Compute?
You'd have to get Andrew Human on here to answer specifically. I think we started to use Rhino Compute at the beginning, but there were just some limitations around what it could do that I think we ended up writing our own. And it was also a superset of all the things we needed to do. We didn't need as much as Rhino Compute could do because it's a broad API that covers every geometric command and everything else. We basically just needed to send a Grasshopper script to Grasshopper, have it execute, and push out a bunch of results to HypeR. So we wrote a sort of custom thing for that.
Okay. So you have also an API for that. That's an internal API, right? That's for HypeR to work.
Okay. I mean, it's also specific to HypeR. If you look at the tutorials for how to bind that thing to HypeR, you have to put nodes in your graph that are send to HypeR. So there's some stuff that you have to do to knit your script into HypeR. So I don't know if like the infrastructure that we built to make that possible is something that would be really fun or useful for anybody else.
Yeah, I've been thinking and like having offline conversations, but also on the podcast about the duality between visual programming and traditional programming, right? I see some people who are opposed to teaching initially people on visual programming if you can have the opportunity to teach them traditional programming because things like loops or like variable definitions or types and things like that are a lot easier to get in your mind beforehand if you're writing code. But at the same time, there's like a friction barrier there where
It's why if you sense that I'm conflicted about this, it's why. Like I would love when I get these comments from Dynamo users that this was my only entry. I wasn't going to take the time to learn how to code. My only entry into this, and then it led to me understanding more. That took me on this sort of progression. It really makes me want to do that. But it's the other thing is that the whole world is written code. You know, you go to Stack Overflow, there aren't snippets of Dynamo graphs in there that tell you how to do something. There's snippets of code. All of the online learning tools are code. Go learn Python, go learn C Sharp. Here's fantastic materials for that. All the code tools, GitHub, all the CI CD systems, everything is all code. So there's kind of like a how do we best leverage all the infrastructure that's out there in the world and move fastest in terms of getting automations online? And then how do we also move quickly by giving people an interface that they're comfortable in? So it might be I'm not gonna rule out that we do a visual programming language in the future, but right now we're trying to concentrate on using the best in class kind of tooling that's out there in the world to support code first development. But we also think, by the way, that we're going to get to a point where Hypar is no code. You know, at some point you'll go on there and the functions will just be there that do what you need. Code is when you have to fall back and do something very specific to your business case. So for a lot of users on Hypar, you'll never have to do that. I don't want people thinking, oh, I have to write code to work on Hypar. No, you just go there and you start building things. But for a lot of people who want to build custom stuff, you have to write some code.
yeah. So before we continue talking about Hyper, I actually wanted to ask this at the beginning, but we just got caught with technicalities. Why do you do what you do?
Oh, why do I do what I do? I think there's a couple of reasons. One that I think people have heard me say before is I just can't stand toil. I can't stand that people are out there in the world doing things that a computer could do for them. It's like a very unromantic thing, but that's where Dynamo started. It's in a way where Hypar started to just make it even better than that. So that's where it comes from. And another version of that people have probably heard is like not rebuilding the wheel. If you have taken the time to automate some sort of process procedure, why should anybody else have to do that again? You know, why can't we all just be building on top of the best version of that thing? And again, Hypar was there to respond to the fact that doing that right now is hard because people treat their visual programming scripts like some sort of IP. They're all very project based and they get locked on the server after the project's done, and we rebuild them for the next project, right? So that accelerating the industry idea by allowing us to build on ever more powerful sort of building blocks was the other impetus behind Hypar.
Yeah, I recently read a quote. I think it was a professor at Stanford. I don't remember the name, but he was kind of warning about the new generation that is coming, that is going to be kids that are not going to stand doing anything manually, right? Like anything that is like a repetitive process that could be automated. There's not going to be patience. They're going to be willing to either find tools that exist to automate it, or maybe if they know how to do it, get some technology together so we don't have to do it by hand.
Anecdotally, I've been thinking that all along. I would love to figure out whatever this paper is. You got to put it in the show notes or something because we've been talking about that anecdotally. The other thing I think, with regards to the generation that's coming up, is the default to sharing, and I think this is a more powerful sort of trend than most people recognize. We have this conversation going on right now in AEC around open and sharing and collaboration and all this stuff. And I think that what people underestimate is that my kids, who are, for instance, 10 and 14, have grown up in a culture where like you share everything to almost to the, you know, it's like a negative thing too, right? Um, So this idea that like you would write this script for a project and then not share it with your teammates or not share it with your global organization or not share it with the world, kind of silly. They're going to default to sharing. So building platforms and tooling that defaults to sharing, I think is something that we should all be thinking about.
Yeah, I think the fact that more, you know, being manager culture, getting Dynamo scripts and all these communities of Grasshopper scripts and things like that, I think there's more consciousness of people actually sharing those outside of the bounds of their work, their company, or what they maybe creating. Some people create packages also for the authorship. It's like,
Yeah.
I made this first. Look, it's my package. Everyone's using it. So there's, there are different reasons why someone we could do it, right? Coming back from architectural background, you can see that that wasn't the case. Everyone was kind of protecting their ideas or their originality or whatever. But as everybody knows, architecture is one of the fields where if it wasn't for precedents, everything would have been, there's an
Yeah.
evolution from old churches to what we do today, or like structures
Yeah.
and long spanned structures and stuff. So how do you think that duality, or what's your thought on open source versus private, and also authorship and knowledge dissemination with patents? It's a wide topic, but
It's a super wide topic, but I mean, I can tell you what the conversation I'm involved in right now. There's a lot of talk about open source. But as one of a relatively small handful of people who have been involved in open source for the last decade in AEC, and it's worthwhile remembering that Dynamo is still open source, right? Um, Sometimes what people want is free software, and that's totally cool. Like, and in fact, the world has conditioned us now to believe that free software should be, because in reality, there's no free software, right? If the software is free, you're the product, or so. But that idea that software should just inherently be inexpensive, that's sort of what people want. And again, with the younger generation, I think that's what they're going to come to expect. Um, and I think that gets conflated with open source. People think, oh, open source software, which means it's going to be less costly or it's going to be free. There's a huge delta between open source software libraries that are out there and people are building and contributing to, and software. Software is the thing you build out of all of these libraries. So while I'm excited that there's like a vibrant open source conversation starting to emerge in AEC, I think people might just not understand what all of it means. Elements, the library that we talked about earlier, is open source. You can go and use that, but it's a software library. You have to build software around it. And for us, if somebody wanted to fork, and this is in the nature of open source, if somebody wanted to fork Elements and build a commercial product around it, I wouldn't mind, because I actually still think that there are market incentives that need to happen in order to pay the people who, for instance, develop the software. They have to have a life so that they can develop the software. So open source, I think, is critically important, and I think the rest of the world, the business world that is, has painted a picture where there is not a duality between open source and closed source being, in some way mutually exclusive for business. I mean, the largest open source projects in the world are contributed to by some of the largest companies in the world. And so I suspect that will be a pattern that takes hold in AEC as well.
yeah, I might be wrong, but I see many open source projects out there, the ones that are not like Mozilla or Chromium or things
Yeah.
like that are really large, and as you said, like with investments from bigger companies. Side projects, maybe like a lot of people who have imagine a software engineer who's already paying the bills with Facebook salary or something like that. They do a pet project on the weekend and they open source it, right? So that's like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of that actually. There's a lot of like open source projects by developers because they just want to do some project, and they open source because they want, I don't know, maybe they want their library of whatever thing it is to become the standard, or they just want to share with friends, right? But there is also this culture that I believe Apple has been fighting a bit with. That is that even small utilities that we see as small utilities have big companies behind. So, for example, I'm
Yeah.
a pro user of, that I use a lot IA Writer. So it's just like
Okay.
the de facto application for like writers, or like the most known on Mac. And I think they've been hiking the prices up more and more and more because it's like a once in a lifetime subscription. I mean, you
Yeah.
just buy the app once. I think when I bought it was like $5 or $10. Now it's $50 for the Mac app because they think of this thing. Okay, you're gonna be a lifetime customer, so you pay once. You buy a new Mac for like $3,000. $50 is probably not that much, right?
Right.
So these people also open source fonts or templates or things like that for people to contribute and do those things. But I understand the closed source comes from this is not my side project. This is the thing we're eating from because we're a company that focuses on building this app, right?
I mean, I invite anyone to pick an open source library that's currently being used in AEC and go to and this doesn't require code knowledge or anything else. Just go to the repository where that thing is hosted on GitHub, GitLab, wherever it might be, and look at some of the comments. And what often happens is the comment sections very early on as people congratulate, oh, this is amazing. I'm so glad that you built this thing. Thank you so much. And over time, the comments turn into like, well, it's missing this, this, and this. When are you going to get that done? And sometimes you have one developer, a small handful of developers, and they're like, this is like our side project. We're doing this before our family wakes up in the morning or after they go to bed at night. Like it's really hard to develop in that way. And the community just gets like more and more aggressive in it and sort of heaps expectations on there. And the challenge, especially in AEC, in other domains, you might be able to pull in other software developers and say, hey, come and join me on this project, help, because it's going to help, the rising tide will help lift all these boats. In AEC, you don't have the same number of developers to draw on. So even look at the history of Dynamo going all the way back to 2010, 2011. The first contribution from outside people working on the core team of Dynamo, I think took 5 years. And I hope that pace has accelerated. And I've been tracking things like IFC.js, which is a fantastic project out there. And I see more developers on that, and I see them offering bounties and everything else, which I think is a great incentive. I hope that it keeps up, and I hope that it's representative of like a new pattern. But we'll see over time whether or not they have enough talent that they can draw on to maintain that thing.
Yeah, also, I think in the case of Dynamo, if it was a software used mainly by architecture studios or engineers or things like this, it's not like you're building a tool for programmers, right, to build upon. So you also have like a restricted set of people who, maybe through Dynamo Grasshopper, they get into Python and then C#. So it's also more challenging.
We often say it's kind of like we built this cul-de-sac. AEC built this cul-de-sac of visual programming, and we're all down there patting each other on the back saying, I'm the best visual programmer and everything else. But we are kind of in a cul-de-sac. Like the rest of the programming world is not doing visual programming. And so whilst it might help you on this project and it might get you credibility if you make a Grasshopper package or Dynamo package, those things are amazing and you should absolutely share. It's good to like look over the hedgerow at the highway that's running by next door, which is the rest of the software world, and think, man, how could we get on that? Because there's so much stuff out there that you can use.
Yeah, the times that I've got into larger applicable, let's say that I'm going to do some digital fabrication or some data processing or something in a visual programming environment, when things get complicated, I mean, you're wrapping your head around and say like, okay, I give up. I'm going to create a Python node. I'm going to, I'm going to get the data, I'm going to serialize, I'm going to do all my things, and then I'm going to output it. And it's so relieving because then you're just on the world, you can do anything, right? With code, you can do anything. With visual programming, you have to be like, how do I make this the Grasshopper way? Is it even possible? Or like Dynamo?
And it's much more concise, right? And maybe concise is not what we need. Maybe as I get older, like I'm big on being concise about things. But I loved Andreas Diekmann gave a presentation at AU years ago when Dynamo still had orange nodes, for those of you who know. And his whole, or maybe it wasn't because we had node to code, which would have been later. That was after the DesignScript merger. So he gave this presentation where he started with a very complicated visual programming graph. And then throughout the presentation, just like seamlessly, he was like, well, if we collapse those two things into some code, and he did the thing where you can like ring select. And by the end, he had collapsed like a 500 node graph down into this thing that was like a chunk of code that was not, you didn't even have to scroll to see it all. And so there's a big conversation in software about code being legible, code being readable, but because code has to be maintained. And that gets at the heart of one of the challenges with visual programming is the maintainability of that thing. Give it to the person who comes behind you, or you leave it behind and you leave the firm. Who maintains that thing? Who understands what it does? And that's the other thing that code affords, is a certain amount of legibility and maintainability.
Yeah, you got to do a lot of grouping and noting and stuff to make
Right. And that was the natural progression. Like we had to add those things into Dynamo because the graphs get so complex and you're zoomed out and you don't know what anything does. And that is a form of documentation. But the code itself can actually be self-documenting. You can have functions that are actually called the name of whatever the function does. That stuff is not like some add-on layer that you add into code. It's like the nature of code itself, but it is an add-on to like visual programming graphs.
So maybe we can take the opportunity to tell people where they can find you and Hyper online, and how do you engage with the community?
So for better or for worse, I tweet. And so you can find me at Twitter at IKEO. You can find Hypar at HyparAEC, HYPARAEC on Twitter. You can find me, of course, on LinkedIn, and you can find Hypar on LinkedIn as well. And our website is hypar.io. You can sign up for free and start playing with Hypar without ever having to make any kind of commitment. And then, of course, we have a Discord server for Hypar, which I actually don't even know how we do shout outs to Discord servers. Like it's Hypar on Discord. I don't know. Maybe we should put it in the show notes or something.
Yeah, that we can add. There's this invite links, right, where
Yes.
people can join the
So
channel.
we'll have to make an invite link, and that gets you a direct line into the developers on Hypar. So if you have questions or you have support requests, you can go there.
So the people, I think, I mean, I met Eric the other day here in New Orleans. I also know Anthony Hawk and Andrew Human. Well, I don't know Andrew Human. I mean, I've seen him 1,000 times. He's
Everybody feels like they know Andrew
Yeah.
Human because they see his face everywhere. He's always presenting.
I actually was looking to see, because I've met Brian Ringley, for example, in many conferences, or other
Yeah.
people that I've interacted only before online, right? So I was expecting to see him in some of the events now that everything is back on track. So yeah, maybe you can hook us up
Well,
for a podcast or something like that.
I will absolutely get Andrew out there to be at these. He's going to be at the AC Tech event, I think, in New York in November, a couple weeks, whenever that is. You know, he does do a lot of like outward facing stuff. He does a lot of like online. It's been online during the pandemic and everything else, but we should absolutely give everybody in the Hypar team. We try to be good about getting everybody in the Hypar team opportunities to get out, be in the community, speak and present on what we're building.
How has the remote only worked? Because you're remote only, right? And this is even before the pandemic.
Yeah, we were remote from the start. I mean, just personally, Zoom is starting to wear on me. I love being back at conferences. I love zero latency conversation. I think that remote, obviously for software companies, remote can be very successful. I've found it challenging though. I've had to learn a lot about remote cultures, you know, and how remote cultures still manage to be thriving work cultures. And one of the suggestions that I've read in several sources is to just write everything down to support people's asynchronous processing of information. I also am not a huge like Slack fan. We use Slack, and I think my team is very skilled at using Slack. So you can do that, but I just like all the threads, and it's in the thread, and it's in this conversation. It's ding 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 all day long, and you know we also use Notion. So you write design docs. That's like actually my favorite way to work as a remote team. You want to really think about something and then write it down, and then allow people at their leisure to come in there, read that thing, process it at the speed that they need to process it at, and leave comments. I think we probably don't do it as well as we should or as much as we should. But generally, it's been great. It's given people the flexibility to work in their homes, to move around. We've had situations where employees had to go and support family members, you know, on the other side of the country. And whatever their background is when they get on Zoom, I don't care, right? As long as they're contributing to Hypar in the way that's set out, you know, in their job description. So the one thing we haven't done because of the pandemic is have enough like offsite in-person stuff. And I'm really looking forward to being able to bring the team back together again.
Yeah, I repeatedly say this lately because it's just a bit annoying to have all these online interactions on the same medium, right? Zoom has become the default for meeting somebody online, right? Many times, right?
Yeah, it's true. Although about halfway through, I think it was probably about halfway through the pandemic, Serena Lee on our team was like, we're going to try this new thing called Gather. And Gather is this app where you get kind of like a a kind of a cool retro, like pixelated background of an office, and you can add plants and furniture and everything else. And it actually has all the. We used it first for a Christmas party. I think the Hyde Park Christmas party was remote, like 2 years ago or something, and which is a little bit sad when I say it here, but it was actually a joyous event. And you can walk around to these various places in the office, and it disconnects you from the conversation going on, and so it's a proximity based thing. If your little avatar like walks over close to an avatar, you're now video chatting.
So this is, I think I've seen something online, somebody on Twitch maybe, like they're building their own
Yeah, you
bases
can. And so
and
Serena has over time, she's like upgraded our space. We have a little like campfire where we go and do like stand up meetings. We have meeting rooms where when you go in there, you're kind of in this bubble and other people can't like hear or see what. And there's whiteboards in there, and there are virtual whiteboards you can bring up with the team. So it's kind of fun. Although we joke all the time about like we're actually you have to walk your little avatar around in this world, you know. And so it's kind of funny, but it works. And it keeps the team together.
yeah. So I don't know if you know recently, because you probably have a like a corporate Zoom account or something like that. But recently they it used to be that if you have a free account, you create your free account, you can invite people to a meeting, and then if you're 3+, right? If you're 3 or more, after 4 minutes, so 40 minutes, it tells you, oh, you ran out of the free time, blah, blah, blah. And of course, you're not going to have a meeting on your own, right? One person, it doesn't make sense. So if it's 2 people now, somebody decided that it also was limited to 40 minutes. So
Do you know why that is, though?
they want to monetize or
Well,
what?
they want to
Why?
monetize, but you know why it's so important that they monetize it?
Why?
Because everybody already had a contract with Microsoft. Microsoft was already selling you Word and Excel and everything else. At the point at which Microsoft decides it wants to sell you something else, Azure Cloud Credits, Microsoft Teams, they just turn it on for your entire organization and maybe add a little bit to your subscription cost or not. And that's an incredibly powerful thing. And I think they did that at a point in the pandemic when Zoom, was on the ascendancy, right? Its stock was blowing up, and they had to respond. And I think it was an incredibly smart response. Now, people will complain about Teams all the time. Oh, it's not as good as Zoom for X, Y, and Z reasons. But that doesn't matter. Like Microsoft will make it a little bit better over time, and eventually it'll be good enough. And that's all it has to be, is good enough. Now, you might see a corollary with this story to what was announced here at AU with them bundling Twinmotion with Revit, right? That's a channel. Like the fact that everybody has Revit on their machine already and they can embed Twinmotion in there, I think is an incredibly smart idea, but obviously causes a lot of problems for other businesses whom, sort of real-time visualization is their bread and butter. So I think it was not like, Teams was in some way better. It was just about the power of having that audience with some component of your application already installed.
Well, and the fact that got enabled by default on Outlook. So you would create new meetings. And now instead of adding a Zoom meeting, people would say, I'm on the meeting. So I'm on the Teams meeting that you sent on the invite. And
Yeah.
I'm like, what Teams
That's
meeting?
a straight up dark pattern. Right there. When they started doing that, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that's the icky Microsoft stuff that people really, really don't like. But then again, I'm pretty sure that like 90% of the people out there to whom that happened didn't delete it, just had a Teams meeting.
It's more convenient. Yeah, no, I mean, I got a bit pissed off. I said, like, I want to keep having, we had like a Zoom meeting already set up and it's showing these things. So yeah, the patterns are a bit weird. I think that they should be a bit careful. But of course, that's going to push a lot of adoption, right? But also a lot of discontent from people that, that.
Yeah, and that again, the corollary is very interesting to some of the conversations around, Autodesk and the products here. So it's just interesting to see these patterns happen again and again, and everybody's trying to, everybody's trying to do their best. You mentioned also subscription models earlier, and my subscription is just going to get more and more and more. People are getting kind of like sick of subscription models, and so this is something even at Hypar we talk about all the time. Like, are people going to be subscribing forever, like per seat? Or does the automated future that we're talking about, or some of the generative future that we're talking about, do you start monetizing on value instead of just like how many people you have using the software? Maybe it's the value that your customer creates as a result of being able to use software to do some of this stuff.
Yeah, it's complicated. I was going to ask you before about how you decided about the pricing model you have. You have like a free tier basic, then you have like a per user license, and
Uh,
then like Teams license
I
and
will be
enterprise.
I will be very, very honest with you. From the beginning, when we built the platform, I said, Anthony, I'd really like to charge on a consumption basis, like the water that comes out of your tap or electricity. And Anthony is a very pragmatic guy, and he was like, okay, I get it. Maybe we'll get there one day. But right now, nobody buys software in AEC like that. You know, you buy software, somebody in your office is anointed as the person who has the budget and they have the approval to buy the software. And so you got to kind of go through those pathways now as they are. And so that's where the subscription component came from. And even the subscription component was up for debate. Remember, this was now 4 years ago. Subscription was still kind of taking hold. People were starting to get used to the idea that they're going to be subscribing to stuff. And so we thought, okay, I think people are used to enough the idea of subscription now. But as a startup, you're always testing these models as well. So what we've actually found is easier and in some ways more palatable for our customers is now to do a larger commitment for an enterprise agreement over the year that gives them a certain level of support, on top of which they can add things like development hours. So they can say, I want the Hypar team to come in and customize things for me. And then on top of that, per seat usage for the dozens of people that they have who need to use the application internally. But we're always kind of changing things up and experimenting with new models.
I've seen, like, for example, Runway ML. I don't know if you know, it was a work like a marketplace for machine learning models. They had this credit-based system where you pay and then it's usage-based, as you said.
Yep.
Like it was, I think, like 5 cents of dollar per minute that you had a GPU running on the cloud or something like that. But I haven't gotten used yet to that model. When it's, it's my money and I'm putting
Yeah.
it there and it's like draining, it kind of hinders your experience because you're always like, you don't want
Yeah.
to let something run to experiment, right? And that's what development is about.
You don't
Experimenting.
want to penalize the customer for using the system more.
Exactly.
So I think that the company that's kind of struck a really nice balance here is if you look at GitHub's pricing model, most people use GitHub for free. Most developers use GitHub for free. The entirety of GitHub, though, is funded by enterprise usage and behind the firewall installations of GitHub for enterprise. So that could be the model for a lot of SaaS services in the future, is that if you're an enterprise, you have a lot of things that cost developers a lot of money to develop. You need them to be SOC 2 compliant. You need them to have single sign-on. You need to have all these enterprisey things for which you should pay for those software companies to integrate those things to make it possible for you to act as an enterprise. But for the lay user who's coming on there and working on a couple of GitHub repos, a few times a week, you don't want to penalize them for using more of your service. So they both did that. They made a very gratuitous sort of free tier, and then you can move into enterprise. And then they also were able to slice it like, well, if you want more private repos, so that's default to sharing again, right? If you share everything and it's open source, 100% free on GitHub. The minute you want to make something private, you pay. And so that was something Anthony and I talked about at the beginning of Hypar as well. What if everything open and shared with the community was free? And everything that you wanted to keep private because it was your IP, it was important to your organization, whatever you wanted to put in the marketplace and charge money for it, that's what you paid to host on the platform. So it's like I said, we're considering all these models.
Okay. So we're getting here to the end. So we're going to have to wrap up soon. I have a few more questions. What advice would you give to young people?
Regardless of what anyone tells you, they don't know what the future looks like either. Nobody knows. The future is what you build, right? And so what you want to do is position yourself to have the tools and the capital to build the version of the future that you think needs to exist. So for different people, that's going to mean different things. For some people, it's going to mean learning how to code. For other people, it's going to be going out and getting some sort of certification that gets them to the next level and opens up a new audience for them to tell their story. But nobody knows what the future looks like, right? So it's up to the people who get in a position to build that thing. So do whatever it takes in whatever mode that means for you.
Okay. I ask you this other question here that is asked by Tim Ferriss often. It's like, what thing from $100 or less have you bought lately that makes your life easier?
That's a fantastic question. I have a Zebra G750 gel ink pen, which is incredible. And my wife is upset with me because I've started doing the Amazon thing where you get every month, you get I get ink refills sent to me. And she said, "Can you turn this off? You've got too many damn ink refills." The problem with really good pens is that they sometimes go out, right? And then you can't get a model that's comparable, whatever. So I'm like, I want to have a stockpile of these gel cartridges for this pen. So I'm just letting it run like every month. Even if I don't need them, I get a couple. So the G750, that's pretty good. Trying to think of anything else. No, that's about it. Yeah, the G750.
Yeah, if I don't remember wrong, last time was something about coffee
Maybe
something.
I'm. Oh, right. Okay, so right. This is amazing because, but it's not less than $100 is the problem. My wife got. We used to have one of those super Automatica coffee machines, and it broke for all the reasons that complicated coffee machines break. And so I think we talked about a French press. I was like, I got a French press, and it makes delightful coffee. But then for our anniversary or my birthday or something last year, she got me a Breville Bambino. It's like a tiny little coffee machine, and it's fantastic. I love it, but it's like $500.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, but that, in the world of coffee, that's like nothing, right? The next jump up is like something that costs several $1,000s.
If you could choose one thing that AI could do for you, what would it be? And not necessarily to solve hyper problems, like in a more generic term, in a more generic sense.
I wish it could book hotel and plane tickets for me and figure out all the details of like a travel schedule. I wish I could say, I'm going to Autodesk University in New Orleans. This is where I have to be at this time on this day, and this is when I have to be home at this time on this day. Just figure it out, or show me like a bunch of itineraries that could. This probably exists too, but that would be the thing.
Yeah, I wonder if there would be AI systems on both places and they'll be like kind of mediating.
Well, it's because it's one of those things everybody says to me. They're like, you should get a PA or a chief of staff, or I don't whatever they call people who do this kind of stuff inside an organization these days. And it's almost like it's like the version of things that can be automated now, which I would feel bad giving to a human
Yeah.
to do because I'm
So
like, we're right on the edge.
I think that there is a service for that, but for meetings, like that the AI tries to set up the meetings
Well, I'm
automatically or something
okay.
like that.
To answer your question from before, also before we use this for HypeArc, Calendly, the less than $100 thing, what a brilliant, brilliant business. And why did it take decades of Outlook existing before somebody figured out that this was a problem that needed solving and made like an elegant solution for it? So my Calendly link is like one of my favorite things in the whole world.
Yeah, I have it as well, so it's
Yeah.
really nice. I think I have a feeling that Google is trying to build something similar.
That tells you
inside.
something about Google, right? Is like Calendly comes out and grows into like, I don't know, it's a $3 billion business or whatever the last valuation was. And then Google says, oh yeah, maybe like figuring out people's calendars. That's like a good business for us. It's so I mean, how do you get behind on that if you're Google? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. So going back to the other topic, I wonder if if you have an AI that books, because meetings, both parties are interested in having a meeting, so you sign up and they figure it out. But if it's about you booking, it's probably about you booking, but you have a good price, nice hotel, all that stuff. In the other end, there will be an AI that is trying to maximize the opposites, like giving you the worst hotel at the highest
And
price.
you won't know, right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
it never talked to a human
Yeah.
to ascertain whether or not things were actually kind of sketchy.
Exactly.
It could be very dangerous.
So yeah, I don't know about that
I
one.
just don't want to spend my time
But
doing
well,
it.
while the other part is not automated, you could probably use one.
Right.
All right. So harder question, I guess. Any thoughts on where we're going with like climate change and sea level rise and like temperatures?
I'm not an authority, and whatever I say here, I'm going to end up sticking my foot in my mouth. The only thing I can comment on is where I think we is where we can impact this. That is the people who are working on HypeR. And we're in a fundraising round right now, so I've had a lot of conversations with investors whose funds are sustainability focused. So they do want to know, like, what's your sustainability story? We're fortunate in that we have customers who can kind of write that story for us. They say, look, we want to automate all the drywall in a building. 10% of all the drywall that's purchased is thrown in the dumpster. Imagine the amount of energy that's embedded in that much drywall. And all we want to do is move from 10% waste to 5% waste. This same customer was the customer that told us, and they weren't joking when they said this. We build 4 buildings and we throw the 5th one in the dumpster. And I tweeted about this because it was so remarkable. I was like, okay, ah, ha, ha, ha. They were like, look at the amount of waste in the construction industry, and you'll find that that statistic rings true. Through the kinds of process automation, if through moving to buildings as a product, we can substantially reduce waste, and that's it. You forget about all the other benefits to people's time and livelihoods and everything else. If we can just reduce waste, we'll have such a monumental environmental impact. I don't know how it will impact sea level, sea temperatures, any of the other things that people are concerned about. But I do know using less energy to produce that stuff just to throw it away and put it in a landfill is a positive impact, and that's the impact we can help.
Okay, so as a reminder to me, because I need to adopt some of your practices and maybe to the audience, how often do you exercise and what are the sports you engage in?
Well, so Nona went for a 6-mile run with Zach Crone and I the other morning along the Mississippi. It was beautiful. And that movie, by the way, I know it's just like a little thing. He took a movie of Zach and I running from behind because we happened to be running right into the sun, and there was this sort of early morning sunlight streaming through this derelict steel structure that we were running through on the side of the Mississippi. It was my favorite thing of probably like the last 6 months. It's beautiful. And it's just like a 2-second video or something.
We forgot to take a selfie or something.
So what I do, I think in your last podcast, I said I run. I've been a runner since I was 15. I try and run several times a week. I have a buddy that I go with who we run 2 5-mile runs, and then we have a 6-mile run that we do on Saturday. In the middle there, one of the pandemic purchases that we and a lot of other people made was a Peloton. My wife got it, and I was like, I'm never going to use that stupid thing. And now I use it all the time. So I Peloton on Wednesdays. Friday, I try and do some sort of like strength workout type thing also through the Peloton. And then on the weekends, I surf. So, and you've also been surfing. So, yeah, on Sunday, I have a group of guys I go surfing with. So 6 workouts, usually 6, sometimes 7 if I surf more than once in a week.
Yeah, that's great. I'm still not there.
That's a good week, though. I mean, I don't always get there because my schedule is like crazy.
Yeah. As I told you, I do Pilates at least 1 hour a week, and yeah, but everything else that I tell you is not going to be every week. So
everybody keeps telling me I got to do Pilates because even just like sitting here like this, kind of leaned over, I'm going to get out of here and like throw out my back because I guess I'm an old man now. That happens.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same, so don't worry. All right, last things. You pick one of these. I mean, we talked about success last time. Maybe, yeah, it's kind of like a cliche topic by now, but I'm trying to get everyone's thoughts on it. AI content creation. What do you think? It's going.
You mean like the DALL-E stuff?
Yeah, that, I mean, you can limit it to that, but I mean, we're seeing GPT-3 and many other areas where people are creating content.
Well, some of you may have also seen some of the experiments that Hypar and Andrew Human specifically are starting to do on this stuff. And I think where this has immediate impact, going back to our conversation about visual programming, we're tied up in, do you write code, do you visual program, whatever. There is a future, and it's not that far off, where with a structured generative system like Hypar, you'll have a natural language interface to that thing. You'll just say, pick a site, I'll give you the address. This is the kind of program for that address. These are the constraints on the shape of the building. Generate a building. And I know everybody who's going to listen to this is going to say, no, like you can't do that. It won't be architecture. It won't be. That's right. But all these things start that way. Stable Diffusion and the kinds of things that we're seeing with DALL-E started as like not great looking stuff. And now look at those models. They're incredibly sophisticated. So that will happen. And it's a tool like anything else that we have to wield responsibly and use it to build the best kind of interface for our applications. So I think in AEC specifically, there will be more kinds of interfaces driven by AI, and specifically in the form of like natural language interfaces.
Yeah, I've seen some of the latest kind of teaser reels that they've done at Runway. Some time ago, they pivoted from making an ML marketplace, which was more geared to like creatives and developers and things like this, to making a ML-based video editor. So they have a video where I'm looking forward to using it. I haven't tested. They write like fade to an image of whatever, and then click enter, and then the video fades, or
Yeah.
like remove background, or like loop this
Well,
thing.
and the other version of this, in terms of language models, is like Codex, also from OpenAI. But Codex is the one that writes code. And my CTO Matt Campbell, he just asked us the other day, can we get, or now it's the Microsoft version of it is called Copilot, and it integrates with all Visual Studio Code and stuff. And we got a subscription to that because our developers were asking for it. They actually said it makes us faster at developing, and more than half the time, probably 75% of the time, when I start to type something, the thing that it completes with is the right thing or right enough that it accelerates me. So imagine that same thing in building design. I start to do things and it anticipates, given what I've done in the past and what the whole corpus of people out there building things in the world have done in the past at that moment. And it starts to anticipate what you need and sketch those things in. And you can quickly like say, no, that's not what I want. That's going to happen as well.
Have you watched Westworld?
Yeah. I haven't watched the newest season because I find it like very confusing.
The last season?
I watched the last season. Well, I don't know. What was the last season? The one with the bugs up the nose? Is that the last season?
I think so.
Yeah, well, that one I couldn't finish. It was just, it was like too much.
Well, but you know the part that Dolores, the blonde girl, goes to work and has to say the narrative, right?
Right.
So that feels the same. I mean, it's natural language. She's explaining the scene in 3D.
Yep.
So she's saying like a room, it's empty, or it's raining, or so. I feel that is envisioning what we're seeing with GPT-3 and DALL-E and stuff, but for 3D Unreal Engine environment where you're just creating things, and it applies the same way.
If you were here at Autodesk and you looked at any of the sessions around Unreal Engine, around Omniverse, and you see what's going on there, high fidelity, real-time visualization and simulation is going to become a commodity. And at the point at which that becomes a commodity, and at the point at which these models get more powerful, people are going to combine those together to start generating the virtual worlds.
All right. I think this makes it. Thanks a lot for being here again.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure to catch up, Nono.
Yeah, I think it will reinforce again, because I don't know how long it's going to be since I can record in person when I go back to Spain, right? So much easier to record this way than on camera and stuff.
Let's make a deal. I'll come to Spain for the next recording session.
I used to have a studio. I don't know if I showed you. I had a recording studio with like a chroma and like absorption panels and stuff. We just tear that down because that place is being renovated. I mentioned it on the live stream and stuff. And now I'm back at recording from home, sadly. But I have plans to rebound, like to make it again a bit better, like more official. And have my idea is to have like a recording room where I can do like live streams and video and a bit of podcasting on my own, but then have some sort of, I don't know, like a table or like a couch or something I can do more in-person interviews.
Amazing. Although I will say you've done a fantastic job of converting this hotel room into a recording studio.
Are we in a hotel?
This you wouldn't even know. It's a very pro job here.
Oh yeah,
we look like sportscasters actually sitting on the couch looking at the TV here.
you do like I don't know
commenting
if I do.
on golf or something.
I don't know if I do, but you do definitely.
Oh, that was like a dig. I look like a sportscaster.
No,
that's all right. I'll take it.
I've seen myself too often, so I don't know anymore. But all right, so yeah, thanks a lot for being here, and thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.